here. Are you all able to see it? I think so. Great. Okay, so let's start with the presentation, how to ace your first job. The first thing to do, which sounds very obvious, but it's not, is first of all to choose the right company for you. And to do that, I would say the biggest, most important pillar is the culture fit. So I'm going to tell you a bit about my own experience. So around 3 years ago, I was just like you. I was a young graduate and I was deciding where I wanted to do my last internship that was going to result in a job. And so I remember everyone, was telling me to get a job in a big company where there was a lot of financial security, there was going to be career growth. My family was excited about this. All of my friends from my university, we were going towards that direction. So I didn't really think twice about wanting to start my career in a big company, in a big corporation. So I remember when I went in to do the interview, I could tell that my manager-to-be and I wouldn't get along really well. We felt like, something wasn't clicking. I remember also walking around the office, meeting the team, and there was something inside of me that was just telling me like, I don't think I'm going to be comfortable working here. But I remember, just shutting that voice off and just being, this is a great opportunity. It's going to look great on your CV. Just do it. And so I did it for 6 months. And to be honest, for the last 2 months, I was so miserable. I remember just feeling so upset and frustrated. I didn't even want to go to work. Things with my manager were getting worse. I didn't get along with my team. And I just, I felt that I was losing my confidence as well. I didn't understand what that was happening. And so it definitely took a toll on my mental health. And so towards the end, obviously, the company didn't offer me a contract and I didn't want to stay. And I just remember thinking, am I ever going to find a job at a company? And then at that point came knocking another opportunity to work for the complete opposite, which was a very, very small company that was starting, that was growing, where, it felt more like family than a big corporation. And, although I was happy in that environment, I'm not saying that big corporations are bad and startups are good. I think you just need to find what is the right fit for you. And that second company, I was much happier. I felt like I could be a lot more myself and definitely, have a better relationship with my job in general. I used to be much more productive. I used to be much better at my job. So once again, the culture fit is so important. Try to maybe ask people who work in the company that you like to give you some feedback. Try to figure out what excites you about the company. And also what's most important, I would list, the values that you have that are very important to you in your personal life, and then list the values of a company as well that you think are very important to you, and see if they match. The second thing to choose the right company that you need to assess is your strengths and weaknesses. That's very, very important that you sort of sit down with yourself in the most honest way possible. Make a list of what you like doing, what you're good at, Maybe you're really good at working autonomously, or maybe you're actually really good at working in teams. You might like to be micromanaged, you might not, Try to be as honest as possible so that once you have that list, you'll be able to match those skills with the job description. You don't have to show this list to anybody. It's just for you. But I think it's very, very important that you recognize what you're good at and what excites you and what you're not. For instance, I hate analytical work and detail work. And I tried to do a little bit of work on that. I just really don't like it, and I'm just really bad at it. But I learned that with time. The third thing that's also very important are your needs and expectations. When I talk about needs, what I mean is, it's sort of a reality check-in, right? So maybe, you're just finishing off college, you might have a loan to pay back. So that's something, you need to take into account. You might have a certain lifestyle that you either want to sustain or you want to improve. Maybe, there's a certain career path that you envision. So try to also be realistic when it comes to choosing a company that is right for you and your first job. So imagine you have found a good company, you think you might be really happy there, you know, and then you receive a call and then you get an interview. So interviews are always a bit tricky, I find, and even more so when you start off, because there's not much work experience that you can talk about. So first and foremost, I would say thorough research on company and sector. I cannot stress this enough. First of all, you'll come prepared to the interview, and that just makes a whole difference. And also, when you do research on the company, try to figure out, you know, obviously what their values are. That's just, you know, basics, but also maybe some of the criticism that the company has been given, you know, some articles that have been written about it. Also check, you know, what are the big events that have happened in the last quarter or in the last year. So you're actually able to say those things during the interview, and you show the interviewer that you're interested, that you're engaged with the company, and that you've done your work, basically. And also, don't forget to do some research on the sector as well. You know, identify where the company's position compared to its competitors. That's very, very important. The second thing is to remain calm. So for 2.5 years on my previous job, I used to be on the other side of the interview. So I used to interview a lot of students that were around your age to get into the program that I was managing. And I had around overall 100, 150 students interviewing for this. And I would say around 30% were super nervous. I mean, they would get really, really red. They would lose their words, their trains of thoughts. You know, at some point, like, we'd have to pause as well and like drink some water. It's okay. So a lot of people just react differently to these kind of situations. So what I suggest as a good tip to help you remain calm throughout an interview is to try to go to the bathroom if you can, you know, a couple minutes before the interview starts. So in the bathroom, when you're alone and isolated, you can maybe start doing some breathing techniques, which are very simple. There are tons on the internet if you want to find out. That just helps your brain to slow down and to reduce the levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And that also allows your heart rate to beat a little less fast. You can also do what's super famous, which is the power pause. That helps you to just feel a bit more grounded, a bit bigger as well, and a bit more confident. And I know this sounds silly, but actually it works. So I would definitely try to do that. And once you're in the interview and someone asks you a question and you start getting nervous, try to just breathe a little bit and even take a bit of time to answer a question. That's okay. And to remain calm, I would say the best thing to do is to know your stuff. Once again, going back to research. The last thing about acing your interview is asking the right questions. Obviously, questions about the company, about the position, about the team, yes, that's great. But try to get questions that really show you as well what the company stands for, what, you know, the management style is as well. That can really help you understand what the company is. In terms of the learning curve as well, like, try to figure out how your life would look like if you stayed in the company for 1, 2, 5, or even 10 years. Maybe ask to meet the team right after the interview. Try to really be proactive in that way. When I was actually doing research for this topic, I found a quote that I thought was great, which is this one. Do not view an interview as a test of whether or not you will do the job well. View the interview as a test of whether or not you will learn to do the job well. And I think that is crucial. You know, you need to be in a job that's going to keep you stimulated, you know, where the learning curve keeps on growing and keeps on giving. You know, that's very, very important. So next time you're doing an interview, I know you're going to be nervous and I know you're going to think, oh, well, I'm being assessed here by the company. but try to, you know, reverse that a little bit and think, okay, I'm also interviewing them, you know, I'm also looking at what opportunities I can take from working with them and giving my time, which is also precious, to them. So imagine now that you've done the interview, things have gone well, and they've offered you a position. So the first, I would say, 2 months are important. And these are some of the tips that I would give you guys to excel. So the first one is being proactive and establishing good habits. By being proactive, I mean, you know, try to blend in, try to talk to your teammates as much as you can, and, you know, maybe give some ideas on projects. Maybe you've done some research and you saw, you know, that doing this event could be really beneficial for the company. Try to never eat lunch alone as well, meet people from other departments, really try to grasp really what the company stands for. Also, you know, take notes during the meetings, offer to take the minutes as well and to send an email, like a recap email afterwards. That really shows that you care and that you're invested. It's really important that you show some level of autonomy. And obviously establishing good habits, that applies, I would say, for both your professional and personal life. But like a good habit that you could establish, for instance, would be every morning when you come to the office, you give yourself 5 to 10 minutes to sit down at your desk, to not really talk to anyone and go through your emails. Or for instance, you can decide in the evening, right before leaving the office, to do the to-do list for the day after. Basically, establishing good habits will help you structure your day better. And the first 2 months, they're full of new information. They can be extremely overwhelming. You might feel like, you know, you don't have the skills to do the job or whatever. So keeping good habits will help you navigate those tumultuous waters. The second thing is to, and I would say that is the most important thing, is to define clear goals with your manager. So as I said earlier, the first job, I was not getting along with my manager, but I think it's because I didn't really know what he was expecting from me, and I just didn't really know how to communicate that. So really, when you start working with a company and you have a new manager, assess what success means with your manager. Really define, you know, what he expects or she expects from you in a very clear way. Try to also maybe after 2 or 3 months to come up with a review as well, so that you're able to know what you're doing well and also what you're not doing so well, because obviously you're a newcomer, it's your first job, everyone makes mistakes, and it's very important that you remain open to criticism, you know, or to just ways to improve yourself. That really goes a long way throughout your whole professional career. And the last thing, which is a bit controversial, it's set boundaries. So that kind of goes against with the being proactive thing that I just mentioned, but I think it's so important. When you're being proactive, I think it's great because, you know, you just want to join in and do as many projects as you can and stay late if you need to, work on weekends, blah, 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 blah. We all do that and we've all done it. The problem with that, though, is that people get used to you being available all the time. So setting boundaries, you know, after 1 month or 2 months is actually the perfect time. It is basically the biggest mistake that I did on my previous job, which is I never set boundaries. I think I started setting boundaries after like 1.5 years, and that was way too late because my manager wasn't really understanding why all of a sudden I was setting boundaries when I hadn't before. So that will really help you a lot balancing that work-life balance. I feel like with any job, but most importantly with your first job, it becomes like the most important part of your life, and your personal life takes a toll, right? So I think it's very important that you assess what you're happy with, you know, your family, your friends, your hobbies, your exercising routine. Those are things that really nurture you as well. And so try not to knock them out of your life completely and set boundaries early on. Okay, so these were my tips on how to choose the right company, ace your interview, and excel during the first few months. And now I'm going to hand it over to Karen, who is going to talk about the difficulties that new hires encounter. Let's see if Karen is online. Yeah.
Give me a second. I think she's muted.
Shit.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlotta. The first part is about how do you get to arrive to a new job. I'm just testing. Can you confirm, Carlotta? Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So the first great news that I want to tell you before I talk about the difficulties is that most new hires, when it's a healthy company, when it's a good company, when the HR have good recruitment processes and so on, most of all new hires end up staying in the company, or there are much more positive KPIs about people staying than the few people who leave. But I want to still share with you the feedback that I have gotten of people who stayed but still had difficulties in the beginning. And this is very normal because when we start a new job and we've not necessarily worked before, especially for junior employees, they're doing everything for the first time, and it's normal that they encounter difficulties. So the feedback that I have for you are a bit of compilation from very different departments. So some people who are in marketing, finance, IT, developers, sales. And this applies to almost all new hires in any team, especially if they are junior. So the first difficulty that I've heard of is the feeling that they're learning not enough, not fast enough. So what happens here is that very often the new hire wants to prove himself or herself. They're super engaged and they feel that they're not learning fast enough. And this is the problem here is that they compare themselves to their colleagues. You know, they compare themselves to the whole team who is possibly more senior, who have more experience. They don't realize that it is impossible to learn everything there is to learn in 2 months. And in a way, thank God for that, because if you learn everything in 2 months, you will be very bored very quickly. So if in a year or if in 6 months you end up feeling that you're not learning fast enough, take a step back and say this is part of the process. You will not learn you will not learn everything there is to know very quickly, and that's normal. The next point, Carlotta, if you can just press. Thank you. The other difficulty that I hear is, so this does not happen very often, but I have heard this. It's the expectation versus reality. Some people feel after a few months that they're disappointed by the job itself. Perhaps the job is too analytical. Perhaps there's a lot of time on doing administrative tasks. Perhaps the job requires a lot of teamwork and the person was not necessarily expecting that. Perhaps they don't have the bandwidth to take decisions very quickly. This happens basically for several reasons. First of all, and it goes back to what Carlotta was saying, is that sometimes when we don't ask the right questions in an interview process, we cannot project ourselves in the job, and so we realize that the job is not what we expected. And so it goes back to the idea of the importance of asking the right questions during the interview process. How big is the team? How much of my time will I be collaborating with others? What is the management style? How much time will I be spending on specific projects versus
Okay, I think Karen is frozen. So let me just continue. Let me just hold on a second. Okay, I know part of her thing, so I'm gonna go on. So yeah, so she was saying expectations versus reality. That's very, very important. And once again, it goes back to asking the right questions. The third point is feeling that the mission isn't very clear. So once again, it goes back to asking questions, and according to her, it is the beginner mistake. So I totally relate to that. I used to feel that if I asked that many questions, people would, think that I'm a bit dumb or that I don't understand things fast enough. And so I would pretend to understand things, and I didn't. So that just was the worst, I think, thing that I ever did in that first job. So very important to ask questions. I think, it looks worse to not ask questions, and it's a bit more worrying to not ask questions than ask a stupid question. When it also, once again, you feel like you don't want to bother your manager, so you don't ask many questions, or you don't ask to clarify certain points. It also goes back to what I was saying to, defining clear goals. Because if and that actually happened in the company that I used to work for. Certain people had a bit of a blurry concept, and so okay, I think Karen is back. All right, so I was just talking about mission not being clear, and I was just finishing off that point. So I will hand over the presentation to you.
Sorry, my internet cut off, but great if you, Carlotta, said it, we can just skip to the next one. Okay, so also another important difficulty that is mentioned is that there's a mismatch between the job and the skills. So here what happens is that sometimes a new hire realizes that he or she needs to speak French, and they forgot that they had mentioned in the interview process that they're very good at speaking French. Or they realized that they should be proficient in Excel, and they had forgotten that they had mentioned this, but they're not really proficient in Excel. Here, the main point is, if you oversell your skills, like a lot of candidates do, it will end up biting you later on. So be careful not to Carlotta is laughing. Be careful not to oversell your skills. Be transparent, because if you are in a position where the management trusted you and hired you for a specific skill, and realize that you need to explain that you haven't really spoken French in 15 years, or you haven't really used Excel in 10 years, there will be you will feel there will be a loss of trust possibly, and you will also be the one who will be paying for your own overselling of skills. If there are mismatched skills, more because you were not expecting the skill, you also need to mention it to your manager. At some point you can say, I was not expecting to use Excel that much, I'm wasting a lot of time trying to discover how to do with VLOOKUP, please help me out. Don't do the beginner mistake of not asking for help. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it's a sign that you're mature enough to realize that Excel is not necessarily what you're really great at because you've never practiced it, and it's okay, you need help. So this is one of the main points here. Carlotta, tu peux... Yeah, so another one is very related to what you were saying, Carlotta, earlier, is the beginning is most beginnings of any job is difficult. Especially if you've never necessarily worked before, and if you're discovering for the first time how to handle and manage your time. And so you end up possibly feeling a lot of pressure. You want to, pressure to drive projects, pressure to deliver, pressure to learn fast enough, and everything. It can end up feeling like too much because you've never been through this before. And this is also very okay, because you need to keep in mind that you will not learn how to manage your time properly in the first year of your work. You might even take much more time of inexperience and maturity before you know how to handle the workload and the pressure. And so I hope this seems so much like common sense, but it's not necessarily common practice. And you will learn it with time. Just keep this in mind. If you feel like there's a lot of pressure, take a step back, say, what can I do about it? Do I need to raise a flag and talk to my manager? Is this part of the learning process? It does get better after some, like the beginning is more difficult than the rest. This is like my main message here. Carolita, tu peux, s'il te plaît.
Yeah. So, okay, guys. So basically, this is the end of our presentation. Now we're going to enter the Q&A part. So you're more than welcome to ask us a questions through the chat, and Karen and I will answer it. And once again, like, I hope this hasn't made you unmotivated to find a job. I think, you know, my first real job, I would say, was super exhilarating, and I loved working myself off. I was going to say another word, but I decided not to. But so yeah, so I think, you know, it's very exciting, and the career that you'll choose is going to be great. You're going to have loads of ups and downs, maybe career switches completely. But just bear that in those tips that we gave you in mind, and hopefully that will help you in the future. So go ahead, if you want to shoot any questions on the chat, we'd be more than happy to answer it. Joe, I have a quick question. Since I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat.
Maybe you could, there's a chat button. You could look it up.
On my...
Carolita, I can see the first question. I can read out loud for everyone anyway.
Yeah, that works too.
The question is from Kaya. So the question is, so it happens that you are stuck with an image, like they say, first impression is last impression. How to overcome from that? Wow. Okay, so I think here the 2 points are, yes, the first impressions are super important. This is like to keep in mind. And you can also overcome it if you have a bad first impression by just perhaps putting a plan. It depends a lot on what wrong impression you put. Sometimes the difficult impressions is that some people are perhaps too engaged, and they feel like they want to answer everything, and they end up having the impression of someone who is perhaps a bit annoying, let's say. It's also a beginner mistake that you can fix by just calming down, by being open to the feedback that you do receive. You know, if someone tells you, is nice enough to tell you that you have made a wrong impression, take it into account. It's very important. Yeah, Carlota, do you have another answer or an opinion?
No, yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, just, you know, if you're aware that you've had a bad first impression, try to figure out what was it about you that, you know, was not received well, and maybe you can understand that about yourself. That will also allow you to work on yourself a little bit more, and and trying to just maybe reverse that impression by just showing up and doing your work.
Carlota, if you're done with the presentation, maybe you could close it. And yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, there you go.
Works now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I could see the chat earlier as well.
Yeah, perfect.
Karen, do you want to go with the second question?
Yeah, I'm reading. So the second one is, what if because of the pandemic we don't get the job we want and we have to do the job we are not completely interested in? How to deal with that? Good question. So I've been, ever since the pandemic started, I was helping a few students fix their CVs. And one of the main things that I did tell students is that, yes, and all honesty, a lot of companies right now are experiencing a freeze in recruitment. But this is not necessarily, this does not mean that you should be demotivated and not send your CVs. Because as soon as the things will go back to normal, and it will eventually happen, the freeze will disappear and HR will start recruiting again. And if they see that people have been proactive, if they have a very good CV, they'll say, oh, instead of spending 3 months looking for candidates, well, I have this good CV and I can just call them. Another thing that's important to keep in mind is that, and this is just based on my personal opinion, a lot of companies, well, the jobs that are the most impacted by the pandemic are not necessarily the very junior jobs. It will be more the very senior job position that costs much more, that is much more expensive for a company. So in a way, students who are young students, they will be impacted definitely, but not as much as the others. Knowing this was not your question. So just to answer your question, I think that experience is super important. So if you look for a job and you spend time and you do not find what you're perfect, dream job, but you find something that seems to be like a good opportunity, take it. Like, this is my opinion.
Yeah, I think sometimes you have to do stuff that you don't want to do. I mean, it sounds really weird when I say that, but I think, like just sometimes, working for a company, even if it's 3 or 4 months, just, so that it gives you time to look for something else in the meantime. Just sometimes, well, we don't do our dream jobs, and that's okay. We're going to learn from that. And also, we're going to put ourselves in a situation that we don't like, and we're going to learn how to handle that as well. So for me, there's never a bad experience. My first job, although it felt terrible at the time, I'm so grateful for it because I learned so much from it. So I definitely think, if you're not 100% interested on the topic, still do it. Still do something. Be active during these times.
I definitely do. And it's as you said, Carlotta, I started my career in finance and sales in banking industry. It was a very long year because it was not what I really wanted to do, but I could not have learned it unless I went through it. So
yeah, exactly.
And another of the questions is, it's not very related to the topic, so perhaps we can keep it to the end if we still have time. One of the questions is, some jobs don't offer high salaries, but job role is interesting. Should we compromise over financial aspect? I think this depends a lot on what financial aspect you are. One of the things that I see a lot, and I hope people, maybe a lot of you can hear this, a lot of new hires, because it's a generation thing, I think, they just left university and they're expecting a very high salary. And the reality is that HR looks at the CV, they don't have experience and they're expecting a very high salary. There's a mismatch between the market and the expectations. So if the salary is not amazing, but you're in the right position right now, perhaps you're still young, you don't have the loan for a family with 5 kids and so on, perhaps right now is the time to start off on a normal salary. And then when you have experience, when you've differentiated yourself from the market, after that, you can start requesting higher salaries. But there's definitely this to keep in mind, I think.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think, just like do a list of what your expenses are and what you could live by. So maybe, I don't know, you earn enough to pay your expenses, but maybe not enough to save a lot of money or to go on like a big holiday a year, but maybe you have enough to get by. And that's sort of what happened to me in my second job, which is, at first I had barely enough to get by, but I was really excited and I was happy, and I knew that after a couple of months there was going to be a review and my salary would go up. So that's also something you can find out about, what are the sort of salary grid basically. But if it's something that you're interested in and you don't have family to support, friend to like whatever it is, and it's just your time and you like it, I would say yes, 100%. There's a question which is, what would you do when someone else steals credit for your work, and how to go about it? Karen, you're the expert here, so I'm going to let you answer that.
I'm not an expert about stealing credit.
That's not what I meant.
No, I'm trying to think here. I think this does happen often in the workplace, that there's this perception that I said something but the person who has spoken the loudest took all the credit for it. It's something that happens quite often. A lot of people don't intentionally do this. A lot of people don't even realize that they're taking someone else's idea. If this is happening very often with the same person, then you can just have a conversation with that person, because maybe they're not realizing it. If it happens and you feel that it's intentional and the person really is clearly always stealing your credit, perhaps even talk to your manager about it if going through him or her did not work. But yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I would say it's something very similar. I would say if you have a problem with someone and you feel like the person is stealing your work, have a word with him or her, but not aggressively. I think it's very important to learn how to communicate at work, and we can get extremely frustrated from time to time. So just learning to communicate what your emotions are for a certain thing in a way that the other person doesn't feel like you're just pointing fingers and you don't want to have a proper conversation. And then if things don't go well and you've tried it, then go to your manager. And then if it's the manager who's stealing your work, once again, sit down with the person and talk about it. And also, you know, like if this goes really bad, just have everything written down via emails. You know, I think it's facts for me are super important. That's what I learned, you know, like you can have a feeling about something or you feel like you've discussed it in person, but if there are no facts and if there are no tangible things to back up your argument, you will always lose the argument. So if this has happened, maybe send an email to the person saying, well, I feel like this is the idea that I had put forward and your idea was kind of similar, whatever it is, but maybe have it written in email. Karen, I think you're mute. Joe, if you could unmute her. Because you're mute. Joe? Well, let's go.
Yeah, I'm on it. I'm looking for.
Okay. I'm just going to read out loud the question. Which soft skills are most important to ace the interview and how to work on that skill?
Good question. Carlotta, tu commences ou...
Yeah, sure. So for me, I would say being calm. Like, once again, as I said during my presentation, I have conducted a lot of interviews. And so being calm and poised, I would say very, very, very good. I've had very cocky students as well. And I really didn't like that. As soon as someone would come along being, I'm amazing, I'm the best, hire me. I would be like, no. So I would say like definitely being calm, you know, being structured in your mind, you know, just like have your thoughts just prepared somehow. So when you say them, when you say your ideas, it makes sense. You know, some students would, you know, say one thing and then they will jump into another thing and then go back to that first thing. And you're like, whoa, okay, I really didn't understand what was going on. So for me, like the best people that I interviewed were people that were calm, they were smiling as well, you know, they felt comfortable and they just felt like quite confident about the information that they were giving. Karen, if you want to contribute.
Yeah, it's exactly as you said. I would say as perhaps the communication skills is one of the most important soft skills that we look for. Communication. So the idea of communication skill is exactly as Carlotta was saying, how to be structured, how to say the right things without taking too much time. I'll give you two examples. One candidate like, tell me a bit about yourself, and they end up talking for 20 minutes. It's like that's not a good idea. Or perhaps tell me a bit about yourself, and they go one by one and decide to say everything there is on the CV. Not a good idea. And a good way to practice these skills, and this is possibly the best tip that I can give you that someone else gave me when I was in your shoes, was take every possibility you can to go through interviews. If you are send a CV to a position that you're really not interested in, but you get an interview, take it. Do the phone interview because you will be practicing. And when you practice the skills for a job that you're not necessarily sure you will take, you will learn, you will improve what you'll say the next time. You'll get better knowledge of perhaps the salaries in the market. Like you don't lose anything by going through the interview. And it's very important, if you are applying to a job that you love, don't make sure that interview is not the first interview that you do. You should go there saying, I've done 5 interviews, I'm comfortable, I know what my main 3 messages are, and so on. There's a rule of 3 in communication skills that is very good. It's like, what are my 3 main points? And you know, our brains like the idea of 3 things.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's I mean, listen to her, she's experienced. Okay, that's a tricky question coming up next. How to deal with rude or short-tempered bosses. So I encountered that once, but it wasn't my direct boss, it was my boss's boss. And she was, to be honest, super hard to deal with. Like one morning she would come, she would say hi to everyone, she was happy. The day after, or like 3 hours later, she would be super angry. And like, you didn't really know how to speak to her. So I think I'm still learning how to deal with people like that. I think I don't know, I find that a bit tricky. I think, it's important maybe to, at some point, have a discussion with that person. But once again, as I was talking about it earlier, don't go in aggressively, don't go in like, oh, you did this to me and, I felt that way. But try to always be a bit more round in how you speak to the person. Always, figure out also what you did wrong and what could have pissed them off in a way. But try to find a middle ground, a compromise. I think that's very important. But Karen, like, if you want to jump in,
that's a good answer. Like, I think we will not all be lucky in our jobs and our careers to always have the perfect manager, right? So you'll always say, okay, if she or he has a bad temper, but everything else is okay, perhaps you just start working around it. But I think here the main message is more, you will learn with time to manage your own manager. I don't know if that sounds, manage their temper, manage how they are under stress, because they have also stress. Take perhaps a step back and accept more of their personality flaws. But I think that it's super important that you, perhaps even before getting there, that you evaluate what type of manager you will be working with. Ask them how they are under stress, or ask them what they expect of you, and so on. Like, try to, in the interview process, to identify what type of personality you have in front of you, because the reality is whether or not you succeed in the job depends much more on the manager that you will have than on the company itself. And people quit managers, they don't quit companies.
Yes, I would say yes. Amen to that.
This is from experience that a lot of people are talking.
Yes, I agree. I think, as everything in life, you'll learn to deal with your emotions as you grow older. And maybe something also that I would say is important is to figure out whether it's only with you that he's like, or she's like this, or do other people feel it and see it? I think that will also help you understand also, maybe it's something that you're doing, or maybe he or she is just like that, and how you navigate that. But I definitely think it can take a toll on your mental health. And once again, and I cannot stress this enough, a job is just a job. So if you feel like your manager is putting so much pressure on you, sorry, the doggy, I have a little puppy and he's being very naughty right now. Just putting out there you go. So just make sure that, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But yeah. Okay, so let's do, should we do our last question?
So there's one.
Yeah. So what would be an ideal answer for tell me about yourself? That's a good one, because I feel like when I was in school.
Carlota, sorry, it cut, so I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that I find that's a tricky one. When I was in business school, right when you guys were like right before graduating, we had tons of workshop, and like we had to introduce ourselves, etc., etc., etc. And so I think they say in 2 minutes you should be able to give, as Karen said, like the rule of 3, like 3 important information about you. And also a way to catch the attention as well. I think Karen is much better suited for this answer.
So it will be something like, it's about how the art of pitching yourself, basically. And there are also a lot of books on this online, and a lot of things that YouTube things that you can practice on. But I think it's actually very simple. Not a lot of people expect you to tell them your life story, but just very quickly imagine you're in a networking event and just like, hey, who are you? And you just did 3 main things. Well, I'm from this city and I've been working in this field, or I've studied this. I studied marketing for the past 3 years, and I'm looking for a marketing job more from in digital marketing, because this is what I really enjoy. That's it. You don't have to go that much into details. Or what about, tell me about yourself. I don't know. It's not easy. I understand it's not easy, and God knows I'm not the most synthetic person. So it's definitely something you can practice. So
Yeah, I would say practice. Like I used to, even to like do interviews to get into my school. I used to practice with my mom a lot. I used to have like to write it down, bullet points or full sentences, and just like, you know, go over and over and over and over again. And then like, once again, if you're prepared, you'll do well. You know, sometimes your brain can get hijacked and feel like, oh my God, I forgot everything. But then, you know, once you breathe a little bit, and there's blood flowing again, your brain remembers. It is a perfect, amazing machine. Your brain remembers, so just be prepared.
And keep it simple. Like when you can, keep it simple.
Yes.
Maybe we have one last, if anyone has a last final question, perhaps. I don't know how much time we still have.
Yeah, we can take one more question.
One more, if anyone, yeah.
Yeah.
No? No more questions? Oh. It's hard to structure the thoughts of answering some questions in an interview for which I haven't prepared. Oh yeah, that's a good one. So the way I work, so when I'm asked a question and I don't know the answer, literally, that's maybe going to make you laugh or you're going to feel very identified. The first thing that happens in my brain is, oh my God, how am I going to answer this? Oh my God, I don't know. So literally like the first second, my brain goes, no, how do I answer this? And then my brain goes back and just thinks, okay, I think maybe of the 2 ideas or 3 ideas that that the question's asking, or like what the topic is, and I really try. It's like opening a wardrobe in a way, and it's like picking, you know, stuff that I've already experienced or articles that I've read, just like information, knowledge that I know, and I try to find it and put it together. And I don't know if that's gonna help you in any way, and just like even taking a bit of time to answer, you know, you can say, well, can you give me a few minutes? I would like to give you a proper answer. So that helps you as well and gives you a bit of time to think and to structure your thought. Yeah, I don't know if that helps you.
So this is actually a good question. If you are asked a question that you're not prepared, it means that the recruiter is doing a good job. The point of questioning, the point of asking questions is not to see how well you're prepared and to see like, you know, of course it's better if you are prepared, but the whole concept of an interview is to see how you think, how you are in a normal job, in a normal situation. So a good interviewer will make sure to ask you a question that you've not prepared, to see how you react, to see how you think on your feet. If you're asked this question when you're not stressed, I'm sure you'll probably have a structured answer to come up with. But here also a main point is be careful about just talking for the sake of talking, because we are scared of silences, which means that a lot of some HR or even some manager, they will take their time before asking you a question just to, you know, to test how you are under silence, because silence makes you stressed. And they will make sure that they've asked you a question that you have not prepared. And I haven't done a lot of I'm not a recruiter, so I haven't done a lot of interviews. I have just done a few bunch, but I know for a fact that sometimes I have heard it in another specific situation where there's a manager who was not sure that he wants to recruit a person because the person had all the right answers for the interview. You know, the person was very well rehearsed, and we did not necessarily feel that we knew what type of personality we're handling with. Because the real life is nothing will be rehearsed. You will be having to figure out every day how to answer something.
So yeah, and I think I would also like to add, so when I was doing the interviews, we used to do this thing that I found really great. We love to surprise our candidates. And so we used to have this card game with words written on them. And they had to either say the first word that came to mind when they read that specific word on the card, or they'd have to tell us a personal experience about that specific word. And so it was word, like sometimes it was like easy words, such as like compromise, like tell us the time where you compromised, or sometimes it was failure, tell us when you fail, etc. So and so the students, I always used to take the students that were able to give a good answer under those circumstances, because the students would be like, oh my god, so they literally had a few seconds to think about it, and they had to share something personal, but something, you know, to show also that personality. So that game used to work really, really well, and the students would get really stressed, and but you can tell like how people reacted under that kind of pressure. So yeah, so be prepared, and once again, like when you're doing an interview, they also want to test who you are and your personality as well. So just also be yourself, because like if you're not being yourself and you're pretending to be someone else, you'll end up working at a company that's just not good for you, or with a manager that's not good for you. All right, guys. Well, I think we're done. Thank you, Karen, so much for giving us your time. It's been great.
Before we conclude, do you have any final words for the students?
Oh, Karen, do you want to go first?
Final words, when it comes to an interview, if you are already in an interview, it's already very good news, right? That means that the HR, the managers, they have set a time, they're interested in your profile. So don't oversell, don't over prepare, but also don't come and improvise, because the more prepared you are, the better you are at acing your job. And I think another point that I like to leave you with, given the circumstances, this will pass, and eventually, and you know, as I said before, the more proactive you are now, the more likely you are to get responses as soon as the market is ready for new hires. So don't over worry about it. Make sure that you use your LinkedIn network to contact, call alumni, for instance, because a lot of HR go through their current employees to hire new hires. Make sure that if you have an interview, call an alumni that works at a certain company to get to know the company better, and so on.
Yeah, and I will also say, I think when I was just graduating, I was extremely naive, and I was also expecting my job to be, you know, my dream job, but this is what I want to do, and didn't think that my career would have many different ups and downs, or different facets as well, facades. So I would definitely say, you know, just cut yourself some slack, bring down those dream job things that you have, come back to earth, you know, and you'll build your career as you go, and also as you grow as a person, and also you know, your hobbies and the project and things that really move you as well, you know. So always keep in mind that your first job might be great or might be a bit difficult, but that doesn't define, first of all, you and your worth, and that doesn't define your life either. A job can always be left or quit or whatever, and your life will go on. I remember, like, for me, you know, quitting my second job was really hard, because I felt like my job defined a lot of things about me. So yeah, so guys, I really hope your first job is going to be great, and it's going to be hard, so you get to learn a lot, and you get to be better and good professionals as well. And it was such a pleasure to share a teeny tiny bit of our wisdom with you guys today. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you so much, Carlota. Thank you so much, Karen. I'm sure
Thank you for having us.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.